Welcome to the Compact for America Initiative briefing. Our national debt is exploding beyond all barriers. It just breached the $16 trillion mark and is headed to infinity and beyond. We all hear that the fiscal cliff is looming. Well, it really is. Even if you look at our national debt as a percentage of GDP, our gross domestic product, everything our country produces, it is now tipped the 100% mark. We now incur and have incurred more national debt than what we produce in an entire year in this country. The last time we were at this place was in World War II, when our country's very existence was at stake. Every election cycle, Washington tells us it will reform itself, that it can kick its debt spending habits. But it doesn't matter. Republicans and Democrats, no matter who's in charge, have continued debt spending regardless of the outcome of an election, and despite their continued and repeated promises. The reason why is too much power to incur debt is concentrated in Washington. With all that power to borrow limitless amounts of money, special interests and those who depend on government entitlements pile into Washington demanding a piece of the action. And politicians are more than happy to oblige, because the wonders of borrowing mean that they can shift the costs of their current spending to non-voting future generations. But we have a solution at Compact for America. It is a balanced budget amendment, but it's more than that. It's a balanced budget amendment that takes away some of that power that Washington has and gives it back to the states and the people. First, like any decent balanced budget amendment, it puts a firm limit on how much debt Congress can incur. It gives them 1 year to get their budget under control. But it doesn't stop there. It says that if Congress ever wants to increase the debt limit again, if it ever wants to borrow more than what the debt limit provides, it can't do it without a co-signer. It can't do it without a majority of state legislatures approving any increase in the national debt. It checks the power of Washington by making sure that there is someone accountable for not spending beyond the means of the federal government. It holds the president accountable for staying within the debt limit. If spending exceeds the debt limit, the president can be impeached. Finally, it recognizes that our debt spending problem is primarily a spending problem, not a revenue problem. And so it prevents general tax rate increases with a supermajority requirement of 2/3 of each House of Congress. At the same time, it recognizes that we've dug a very, very deep hole. It may be necessary to raise more revenue. So it says that the supermajority provision does not apply to closing tax loopholes, to eliminating tax credits and deductions. It creates an incentive to a flatter, fairer tax. You're probably wondering why state legislative approval. Well, there's 3 reasons. First of all, state legislatures are closer to the people, physically. You can get an appointment with your state legislator far easier than you can get an appointment with your U.S. Senator. Secondly, state legislators are early in their political careers. They care more about their constituents because their constituents matter more to the trajectory of their own ambition. So they will hear the American people and put more weight on the American people than anyone in Washington would. With polling at over 80% favoring a balanced budget amendment, demanding that Congress balance its own budget just like every family does, that means state legislators are more likely to control the debt than Congress ever would be. Finally, state legislative approval decentralizes power. It takes the power to approve debt out of one place, Washington, and distributes it to 50 states, where special interests and those who depend on government entitlements will have a harder time dominating the debate. And the American people will have a fairer opportunity to have their voices heard. And we know one thing's for sure. If you leave the power in only Congress's hands. Congress might appear to tie their own hands, but they'll find a way to feed their debt spending addiction anyway. Every balanced budget amendment idea coming out of Congress has loopholes you can drive a truck through. But states can stop the insanity. Article 5 of the U.S. Constitution gives states the power to originate constitutional amendments, including a balanced budget amendment. This is a perfectly legitimate power that the founders gave the states as their ultimate fail-safe against a federal government gone wild. In fact, this power that states have to originate constitutional amendments was the topic that was the final argument for ratification of the Constitution as made in Federalist Number 85, the last of the famous Federalist Papers. The founders promised us that if necessary, the state legislatures would have the power to use Article 5 to promote constitutional reforms that would rein in an overreaching federal government. But the problem is the process is very difficult. It requires over 100 legislative acts. It requires 34 state applications passed in the form of resolutions in 34 states. It requires Congress to respond to those applications by passing a call resolution. It requires the states to respond to the call by appointing delegates in 26 or more resolutions. Even if the convention meets and proposes an amendment, it still goes back to Congress, and Congress has to pass another resolution referring the constitutional amendment back out for ratification by the states. And then finally, no amendment becomes law until 38 states ratify it, and that requires at least 38 states passing legislation to either have a convention to ratify the amendment or to ratify it directly through their legislature. This is a Rube Goldberg's machine that has never been used successfully to its conclusion. The Compact for America changes everything. It consolidates the entire Article 5 process in two pieces of legislation, one state compact and one congressional resolution. The state compact contains all of the legislative acts that states need to generate for the Article 5 process to work. It contains the text of the proposed constitutional amendment, in this case the balanced budget amendment. It contains a commission to oversee the process, ensuring that the amendment is proposed in an orderly fashion. It contains an application to Congress to have the convention called, and that application only goes live when 38 states join the compact. When the application goes live, that triggers the congressional call for the convention to go live, which is contained in the congressional resolution. When the call goes out, that triggers the appointment of delegates, which in the state compact are the state governors. Why the governors? Because the governors are the statewide representative, a known political quantity, and accountable to the people of each state in a way that few other representatives would be. They also provide leadership. Not only that, but the state compact contains the convention rules. That lays out all of the logistics for voting, where the convention will be organized, and what committees will take place at the convention. When the convention proposes, or if the convention proposes the balanced budget amendment, the compact also ensures that it will be strictly limited to the originally conceived of proposed amendment text. The scope of the convention will be targeted to only the balanced budget amendment. Once that balanced budget amendment is proposed, it will automatically trigger and cause the referral of that amendment to go live from Congress. And then once Congress refers out for ratification the proposed balanced budget amendment, it will cause the ratification that is preloaded in the state compact to go live, finishing and ratifying the entire Article 5 process. In less than 1 year, we could have a balanced budget amendment originating from the states, with less than 50% of the legislative resources deployed than in the ordinary Article 5 process. This is realistic because legislators are actually more familiar with compacts than Article 5 itself. There are over 200 compacts in existence. The average state is a party to 20 or more compacts. It's realistic because we don't have to herd 7,500 cats. We don't have to go out and persuade all of the legislators that are considering this to vote for the compact. By making governors the delegates to the convention, we give them a stake, both politically and personally, that will cause governors to provide leadership. We also have found in poll testing across this country that once you explain that all a compact is an agreement among the states to do something more efficiently, they favor the use of a compact to originate constitutional amendments like the Balanced Budget Amendment by more than 2 to 1. The Compact for America initiative is live. It needs your support. If you want to stop our country from plummeting over the fiscal cliff, this is the only way to do it. Congress will not tie its own hands. Washington will not reform itself. It will take the states and the people acting outside of Washington to promote real reform and to save our future.